Welcome to this peaceful journey into the ancient myths of Egypt. As you settle into comfort, allow the mysteries of the Nile Valley to guide you toward restful slumber. Tonight's stories reveal how the Egyptians understood their world, from the creation of the universe to the eternal dance between chaos and order. Let these timeless tales carry you gently into dreams. In the time, before the first pyramid stone was laid or the earliest pharaoh drew breath, only darkness existed. The ancient Egyptians knew this primordial void as none, endless waters that stretched beyond comprehension, silent and still as death itself. Nothing stirred in those depths. No light pierced their absolute blackness. Yet within this apparent emptiness, all possibilities slumbered, waiting for the spark that would ignite creation. The waters of none were more than mere physical substance. They represented the ultimate mystery, the boundary between existence and non existence, between form and formlessness. In this infinite ocean, the seeds of all that would ever be laid dormant, every star that would light the heavens, every grain of sand that would carpet the deserts, every living creature that would walk, swim, or fly across the earth. Then came the moment that shattered eternity's silence. Without warning or cause, a mound of earth rose from the depths of none. The Egyptians called this primordial hill Ben, seeing in its emergence an echo of what they witnessed each year when the Nile's floodwaters receded, revealing the first patches of fertile soil ready for planting. Just as their crops sprang forth from these exposed lands, so too did all creation spring from this original island rising from chaos. Upon this sacred mound appeared the first being, the creator whose coming ended the reign of emptiness. Different Egyptian cities preserved different traditions about this divine emergence. In Heliopolis, the ancient city of the sun, priests taught that Adam manifested himself through sheer will, becoming the complete one who contained within himself all that would follow. Some said he appeared as a great phoenix whose cry shattered the eternal silence, while others described him as a child rising from a lotus flower that bloomed upon the waters. In Memphis, the theological center of Lower Egypt, a different tradition held sway. There, the god Ptah was honored as the supreme creator who spoke the world into being. Unlike Adam's physical emergence, Ptah's creation was an act of divine intelligence. He conceived the universe in his heart, which Egyptians considered the seat of thought, and brought it to life through his spoken word. Each utterance became reality, demonstrating the power of speech to shape existence. The Theban priests, devotees of Amun, offered yet another perspective. To them, Amun was the hidden one, so mysterious that even his fellow gods could not perceive his true nature. He existed within none, yet transcended it, a paradox that pointed to the ineffable nature of ultimate reality. When Amun chose to create, he transformed himself from invisible potential into visible actuality, becoming Amun-Ra, the revealed face of the hidden god. Despite these variations, certain elements remained constant across all Egyptian creation accounts. The creator, alone in the universe, recognized that creation required multiplicity. Through various methods, some traditions spoke of self-generation, others of cosmic spitting or masturbation. The creator brought forth the first divine couple, Shu, god of air and light, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture and order. These primordial twins represented the first differentiation in the universe. Where there had been only unity, now there was duality. Where there had been stillness, now there was movement. Shu's nature was expansion, separation, and illumination. His breath became the atmosphere that would separate heaven from earth, his light the clarity that would distinguish day from night. Tefnut embodied the principle of moisture essential for life, but also the concept of Ma'at, cosmic order that would govern all existence. Yet even gods could become lost in the vastness of creation. Shu and Tefnut wandered away into the dark waters of Nun, and their father grew anxious at their absence. He sent forth his eye, a manifestation of his creative power, to search the primordial depths. After what seemed an eternity, the eye returned with the missing deities. The Creator wept with joy at their reunion, and from these divine tears sprang the first human beings. Thus, humanity entered existence through an act of divine emotion, forever linking mortal nature to godly compassion. The returned twins soon produced offspring of their own, Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. These siblings loved each other with such intensity that they remained locked in an eternal embrace, their bodies pressed so closely together that nothing could exist between them. Recognizing that creation required space to unfold, the Creator commanded Shu to separate his children. The air god stepped between them, lifting Nut high above while Geb remained below. This moment of separation stands as one of the most frequently depicted scenes in Egyptian art. Nut arches her star-spangled body across the heavens, her fingers, lips, and toes touching the horizon at the cardinal points. Below her, Geb reclines, his body forming the contours of the earth, mountains rising from his knees and elbows, valleys carved between his limbs. Between them stands Shu, arms raised to support the sky, creating the space where life could flourish. The separation of earth and sky established the basic structure of the cosmos, but creation was far from complete. Geb and Nut, though divided, managed to produce 4 children who would play crucial roles in Egyptian mythology: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. With their birth, the great Ennead, the 9 primary gods of Heliopolis, was complete. Atum, or Ra-Atum, Shu and Tefnut, Geb and Nut, and the 4 siblings who would bring both order and conflict to the divine realm. Creation in Egyptian thought was never a single completed act. Each sunrise repeated the first emergence from darkness. Each annual flood recalled the waters of Nun. Each sprouting seed reenacted the original burst of life from the primordial mound. The priests performed daily rituals to sustain creation, recognizing that without constant renewal, the universe would slide back into chaos. This cyclical understanding of creation reflected the Egyptian experience of their environment. The Nile's annual cycle of flood and recession, the sun's daily journey across the sky, the regular movements of stars and planets, all suggested that existence operated through recurring patterns rather than linear progression. Creation was an ongoing process that required both divine and human participation to maintain. The waters of Nun never truly disappeared. Egyptian cosmology placed them at the boundaries of the ordered world, beneath the earth, beyond the sky, past the horizon, in every direction. These chaotic waters constantly threatened to overwhelm creation, requiring vigilance from gods and humans alike. Every act of justice reinforced Ma'at against chaos. Every properly performed ritual strengthened the cosmic order. Every moral choice contributed to the universe's stability. Ordinary Egyptians participated in the maintenance of creation through their daily lives. Farmers who prepared their fields according to traditional methods, craftsmen who followed established techniques, scribes who preserved knowledge accurately, all played their part in upholding the order established at the beginning of time. Even death was not an end, but a transformation, another phase in the eternal cycle of creation and renewal. As your consciousness begins to drift, carried on currents as gentle as those primordial waters, imagine that first moment when possibility became actuality. Picture the Benben Mound rising from infinite darkness. Feel the first breath of Shu stirring the stagnant air. Witness the tears of joy that brought humanity into being. In these ancient images lies a truth as relevant now as it was thousands of years ago. From apparent nothingness, wonders emerge. From chaos, order crystallizes. From darkness, light is born. The rhythm of creation continues even now, in the steady rise and fall of your breath, in the gradual slowing of your thoughts, in the approaching embrace of sleep that will carry you like the sun god's nightly journey through darkness toward tomorrow's dawn. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that you are part of this eternal cycle, connected to the cosmic patterns that the ancient Egyptians recognized in the very fabric of existence. In our next chapter, we will follow the story of Osiris and Isis, divine siblings whose love transcended death itself, establishing the patterns of kingship, agriculture, and resurrection that would define Egyptian civilization for millennia to come. As your mind continues to drift between wakefulness and sleep, let us turn to one of the most moving and profound stories of ancient Egypt, the tale of Osiris and Isis, a narrative of divine love that transcended death itself, of betrayal and restoration, and of the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that came to define Egyptian spiritual understanding for thousands of years. In the time after creation, when the gods walked the earth and ruled over the land of Egypt, Osiris was the firstborn son of Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. Tall and graceful, with skin the color of fertile soil, Osiris possessed a gentle spirit and a wisdom that set him apart from the other deities. When the time came for Geb to choose which of his children would rule Egypt, he selected Osiris, recognizing in him the qualities of a just and benevolent ruler. Osiris took as his wife his sister Isis, whose name means throne, a fitting partnership, for while Osiris ruled, Isis was the power behind the throne, the embodiment of divine feminine wisdom. Together, they formed a perfect union, balancing masculine and feminine energies, strength and intuition, action and reflection. Before Osiris, the people of Egypt lived simply, without knowledge of agriculture or civilization. They were nomadic hunters and gatherers, wandering the land without permanent homes or established customs. Osiris changed all this. He taught humans how to plant and harvest grain, showing them the secrets of agriculture that would transform the Nile Valley into a cradle of civilization. Isis, with her profound knowledge of healing and magic, taught people how to grind grain into flour and bake bread. She showed them how to weave flax into linen, how to brew beer from barley, and how to use plants for medicine. Together, the divine couple brought the gifts of civilization to humanity, elevating them from a primitive existence to a life of culture and refinement. Osiris did not limit his benevolence to Egypt alone. Once he had established order and prosperity in his kingdom, he set out to travel the world, bringing his gifts of civilization to other lands. He did not conquer through force of arms, but through wisdom and persuasion, showing people everywhere the benefits of agriculture, law, and religious observance. While Osiris journeyed to distant realms, Isis ruled Egypt in his stead, maintaining justice and order throughout the land. Their reign was a golden age, a time of peace and plenty, when the principles of Mat, truth, balance, and harmony prevailed throughout Egypt. But not everyone was pleased with this state of affairs. Seth, the brother of Osiris, burned with jealousy and resentment. Where Osiris was tall and graceful, Seth was powerfully built and fierce. Where Osiris was associated with fertile land and life giving water, Seth was the lord of the desert, storms, and chaos. The red color, often used to depict Seth in Egyptian art, symbolized both the barren desert and the destructive fire of his anger. Seth coveted his brother's throne, and more darkly still, desired Isis for himself. He watched and waited, looking for an opportunity to strike against his brother. And eventually, that opportunity came when Osiris returned from his journeys abroad. To celebrate the return of Osiris, Seth organized a magnificent banquet, inviting 72 conspirators who shared his jealousy of the beloved king. During the feast, Seth presented a beautiful chest made of precious cedar wood inlaid with ebony, ivory, and gold. He announced that this magnificent chest would be given as a gift to whomever it fit perfectly. One by one, the guests lay down in the chest, but it fit none of them. This was no coincidence, for Seth had secretly measured his brother's body in his sleep and had the chest crafted to those exact dimensions. When Osiris's turn came, he lay down in the chest, finding it fit him perfectly. In that instant, before Osiris could rise, Seth and his conspirators slammed the lid shut and sealed it with molten lead. They carried the chest, now a coffin containing the trapped god, to the Nile and cast it into the waters, sending it drifting out to sea. Thus did death enter the world, for Osiris was the first to die, the first divine being to experience mortality. His murder set in motion a chain of events that would establish the pattern of death and rebirth that would become central to Egyptian religious thought. When Isis learned of her husband's murder, her grief was immeasurable. She cut a lock of her hair as a sign of mourning, dressed herself in the ragged clothes of widowhood, and set out to find her husband's body, determined to give him proper funeral rites. The image of Isis, transformed by grief into a common woman searching tirelessly for her lost love, became one of the most poignant in Egyptian mythology. Guided by children who had witnessed the chest being thrown into the Nile, Isis traced its path. The chest had drifted out to sea and eventually washed ashore in Byblos, a Phoenician city on the coast of what is now Lebanon. There, a sacred tree had grown around it, encasing the chest within its trunk. The king of Byblos, impressed by the tree's miraculous growth, had it cut down and fashioned into a pillar for his palace, unknowingly placing the body of Osiris at the very heart of his royal residence. Isis, learning of this, traveled to Byblos and took employment as a nursemaid to the queen's infant son. Each night, instead of feeding the child, she would place him in a fire that burned away his mortal parts, gradually making him immortal. When the queen discovered this apparent act of cruelty, she screamed in horror, breaking the spell and preventing her son from achieving full immortality. Isis then revealed her true identity as a goddess and explained her purpose. Moved by her story, the king and queen of Byblos allowed her to remove the pillar containing her husband's body. Isis extracted the chest and returned with it to Egypt, concealing it in the marshes of the Nile Delta, while she went to visit her son, Horus, who was being raised in secret, hidden from Seth's malice. But Seth, while hunting in the marshes by moonlight, discovered the hidden chest. In a fury, he opened it, removed Osiris's body, and tore it into 14 pieces, which he scattered throughout Egypt, believing that this would prevent Osiris from ever returning to life. Once again, Isis set out on a quest, this time to gather the dismembered parts of her beloved. She traveled the length and breadth of Egypt in a papyrus boat, searching tirelessly. At each place where she found a piece of Osiris, she performed funeral rites and established a shrine. This is why, in later times, there were many sacred sites throughout Egypt that claimed to be the burial place of a part of Osiris. Isis recovered 13 of the 14 pieces. The 14th, Osiris's phallus, had been thrown into the Nile and devoured by certain fish, which were thereafter considered sacred by the Egyptians. Using her profound magical knowledge, Isis fashioned a replacement from gold and wax. Then, transforming herself into a kite, a bird of prey, she hovered over the reassembled body of her husband, fanning life back into him with her wings while reciting powerful spells. In this brief moment of revitalization, Isis conceived a child with Osiris, Horus, who would later avenge his father and reclaim the throne of Egypt. But Osiris could not remain in the world of the living. His experience of death had transformed him, and now he descended to the underworld, the Duat, to become its ruler and judge of the dead. Thus, Osiris became the lord of the afterlife, the first mummy, and the model for all Egyptian funeral practices. Through his death and partial resurrection, he established the pattern that all Egyptians hoped to follow: death followed by rebirth into eternal life. His green skin in Egyptian art symbolized rebirth and regeneration, like the greenery that returns after the Nile flood. Isis, meanwhile, retreated to the marshes of the Delta to give birth to and raise her son, Horus, hiding him from Seth's continuing wrath. She became the archetypal protective mother, using her magic and cunning to shield her child from harm, nursing him to adulthood so that he might one day challenge Seth and reclaim his father's throne. The story of Osiris and Isis resonated deeply with the Egyptian people. They saw in it a reflection of their own lives and hopes. Like the grain that is buried in the earth only to sprout anew, like the Nile that dies back each year only to flood and bring new life, Osiris died and was reborn. And in this cycle, Egyptians found hope for their own rebirth after death. The myth became central to Egyptian funeral practices, with the deceased being ritually identified with Osiris. The elaborate mummification process was a reenactment of what Isis had done for Osiris, preserving the body so that the soul might return to it, just as Osiris had briefly returned to his reassembled form. Isis herself became one of the most beloved deities in Egypt and beyond. Her cult eventually spread throughout the Roman Empire, as far as Britain and Germany. She was worshipped as the ideal wife and mother, the mistress of magic, the compassionate healer who understood human suffering because she herself had suffered. In her tearful search for her husband and her protective care for her son, people saw a divine reflection of their own grief and love. Even today, thousands of years later, the story of Osiris and Isis continues to move us. It speaks to universal human experiences, the pain of loss, the power of love, the hope for something beyond death. It reminds us that death is not the end but a transformation, a passage to another state of being. As you drift further into the peaceful embrace of sleep, imagine the determined figure of Isis searching through the marshes in her papyrus boat, her love so powerful that it transcended death itself. Think of Osiris, finding new life in the realm beyond, becoming king of a domain where earthly troubles are no more. Let these ancient images of love, transformation, and rebirth carry you gently into dreams. In our next chapter, we will follow the story of Horus, the falcon headed son of Isis and Osiris, as he grows to manhood and engages in an epic struggle with his uncle Seth for the throne of Egypt, a conflict that in many ways represents the eternal battle between order and chaos, justice and tyranny that continues to this day. As your body relaxes and your mind continues its journey through the ancient lands of Egypt, we turn to one of the most dramatic conflicts in Egyptian mythology, the epic struggle between Horus and Seth. This tale of rivalry, perseverance, and justice became a central metaphor for the eternal battle between order and chaos in the Egyptian worldview. After the death of Osiris and his transformation into the ruler of the underworld, his son Horus was still but an infant, hidden away in the marshes of the Nile Delta. There, in the dense papyrus thickets, Isis raised her child in secret, ever vigilant against the threat posed by Seth, who now ruled Egypt in place of his murdered brother. The childhood of Horus was filled with danger. Seth, aware that the rightful heir to the throne still lived, sent many deadly creatures to find and kill the child. Scorpions, snakes, and other venomous beasts sought out the divine infant, but Isis, mistress of magic and healing, protected her son with powerful spells and incantations. One day, when Isis was away gathering food, a poisonous creature, in some versions a scorpion, in others a snake, found the hidden child and stung him. Returning to find her son limp and barely breathing, Isis was overcome with grief. In her desperation, she called out to the heavens, and her cries were so filled with anguish that they halted the solar boat of Ra itself as it crossed the sky. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and magic, hearing her plea, descended from the sunboat and taught Isis a powerful healing spell. With this divine knowledge, she cured her son, restoring him to health and strength. This episode became the basis for many healing spells in Egyptian medicine, which often invoked the power of Isis as the healer of her son. As the years passed, Horus grew into a strong and determined young god, with the head of a falcon perched upon a human body. The falcon, a bird that soars high above the earth, yet sees all with its keen eyes, symbolized the divine perspective of kingship. A ruler must be both elevated above ordinary concerns, yet acutely aware of the needs of his people. When Horus reached manhood, he left the protective shelter of the Delta marshes and journeyed to challenge Seth for the throne that was rightfully his. This began a contest that would last for decades. Some texts suggest 80 years, as the two gods engaged in a series of trials and battles to determine who would rule Egypt. Their conflict was not merely personal, it represented fundamental opposing forces. Horus embodied legitimate succession, justice, and order. Seth represented usurpation, strength without restraint, and chaos. Yet Egyptian mythology was rarely simple in its moral distinctions. Seth, while often destructive, was also necessary. As the god of desert storms and foreign lands, he protected Ra's sun boat from the serpent Apophis during its nightly journey through the underworld. Without Seth's ferocious strength, creation itself might be undone. The struggle between Horus and Seth took many forms. One famous contest involved a boat race, but with a twist. The boats were to be made of stone, not wood. Seth, literal minded and strong, carved a boat from solid stone, which promptly sank when placed in water. Horus, clever and resourceful, painted a wooden boat to look like stone, enabling him to win the race easily. In another confrontation, the two transformed into hippopotamuses and battled beneath the waters of the Nile. They remained submerged for 3 months, neither able to defeat the other, until Isis decided to intervene on behalf of her son. She crafted a magical harpoon and cast it into the water, but it struck Horus instead of Seth. When Horus cried out, revealing his identity, Isis immediately withdrew the weapon. She cast the harpoon again, and this time it struck Seth. Seth called out to his sister wife Nephthys, appealing to her as his sister, just as Horus had called to Isis as his mother. Moved by this parallel, Isis withdrew the harpoon from Seth as well, much to the frustration of Horus, who felt betrayed by his mother's compassion toward his enemy. The most disturbing episode in their conflict involved a direct physical violation. According to the contendings of Horus and Seth, a New Kingdom papyrus that recounts these battles, Seth invited Horus to spend the night at his house. During the night, Seth attempted to sexually dominate Horus, believing that by doing so, he would establish his superiority in the eyes of the divine tribunal that would ultimately judge their case. But Horus, forewarned by his mother, caught Seth's seed in his hand and took it to Isis. She cut off her son's contaminated hand, cast it into the Nile, and fashioned him a new one. Then she helped Horus gather his own seed, which they spread on lettuce leaves, Seth's favorite food. Unknowingly, Seth consumed the lettuce, ingesting the seed of Horus. When the two gods appeared before the divine tribunal, Seth proclaimed his dominance over Horus. But when the gods called forth the seed of Seth to witness against Horus, it answered from the Nile where it had been discarded. When they called forth the seed of Horus, it answered from within Seth himself, proving that Horus had dominated Seth, not the other way around. This episode, strange to modern sensibilities, reflected the ancient Egyptian understanding of sexual dominance as a demonstration of power and authority. As the conflict continued, the divine tribunal that judged their case remained divided. Some gods supported Horus as the legitimate heir, while others respected Seth's strength and experience. The deliberations dragged on for decades, neither side able to secure a final victory. Eventually, even Ra, the sun god who presided over the tribunal, grew weary of the endless disputes. He wrote to Nith, the ancient goddess of war and weaving, asking for her judgment. Her reply was clear. Horus should inherit the throne as the son of Osiris, and Seth should be compensated with 2 foreign goddesses as wives and a doubling of his wealth and power. But even this did not resolve the conflict. Seth, unwilling to relinquish the throne, proposed one final contest, a race in boats of stone through the waters of the Nile. It was then that Isis intervened with her magic, causing Seth's truly stone boat to sink and ensuring victory for her son. Furious at this intervention, Seth transformed into a hippopotamus and attacked Horus's boat. Horus responded by harpooning Seth with a copper weapon. When Seth pleaded for his life, appealing to their kinship, Horus brought him before Ra. The sun god commanded Horus to show mercy, but Isis, still enraged by the murder of her husband, cut off Seth's head with a knife. Ra reattached Seth's head, recognizing that despite his crimes, Seth fulfilled necessary functions in the cosmic order. But at last, the tribunal reached its decision. Horus would rule the fertile Black Land, the Nile Valley, while Seth would rule the Red Land, the desert. Ultimately, as Egypt consisted mainly of the fertile valley, this meant that Horus became the dominant ruler, while Seth was relegated to the harsh, barren lands at the margins of Egyptian civilization. As a final resolution, Horus and Seth were brought before Osiris in the underworld. The murdered god confirmed his son as his rightful heir and the legitimate king of Egypt. Horus was officially crowned, and cosmic order, Ma'at, was restored after decades of conflict and uncertainty. The triumph of Horus became the template for all Egyptian kingship thereafter. Each pharaoh was considered to be the living Horus, the embodiment of divine kingship on earth. Upon death, the pharaoh would become one with Osiris, while his successor took on the mantle of Horus. This cycle of Osiris, Horus, Osiris formed the theological basis for the continuity of Egyptian kingship for over 3,000 years. The conflict left both gods permanently marked. Horus lost his left eye during one of their battles, though it was later healed by Thoth. This eye of Horus became one of the most powerful protective symbols in Egyptian culture, representing healing, restoration, and royal power. Seth, meanwhile, was forever associated with chaos and disruption, though he maintained his position as a defender of Ra against the chaos serpent Apophis. The story of Horus and Seth reminds us that conflict, even when necessary, comes at a cost. Both gods were wounded, physically and emotionally, by their struggle. Yet through this conflict, a more stable order emerged, one that acknowledged both the need for legitimate succession, Horus, and the role of protective strength, Seth, in maintaining cosmic balance. As you sink deeper into peaceful slumber, imagine the majestic, falcon-headed Horus, his wings spread wide to embrace Egypt in protection, while at the margins, Seth stands guard against the greater chaos that threatens from beyond. In this balance, there is peace, there is order, there is the possibility of rest after conflict. In our next chapter, we will follow the daily journey of Ra, the sun god, as he traverses the sky in his solar bark, bringing light and life to the world before descending into the perils of the underworld each night. A cycle that represented for the Egyptians the eternal rhythm of existence. As your consciousness drifts peacefully between wakefulness and dreams, let us turn our attention to the most visible and essential of all Egyptian deities, Ra, the sun god, whose daily journey across the sky and through the underworld formed the fundamental rhythm of existence in ancient Egyptian thought. Imagine yourself lying beside the Nile thousands of years ago, watching as the eastern horizon gradually brightens with the first light of dawn. The stars fade, the darkness retreats, and suddenly a brilliant golden disk emerges from the eastern mountains. This is Ra, the sun god, beginning his daily voyage across the heavens in his magnificent solar bark, or boat. Ra was often depicted as a man with the head of a falcon, crowned with the solar disk, encircled by a sacred cobra called the Uraeus. This serpent represented his power to strike down enemies with its fiery venom. In his hands, Ra typically held an ankh, the symbol of life, and a waz scepter, symbolizing power and dominion. Sometimes he appeared as a full falcon or as the Benben stone, the primeval mound from which creation began. In his form as the midday sun, he might be shown as a man with the head of a ram, known as Ra Horakti. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun was not merely a celestial body, but a living deity whose daily cycle reflected the fundamental patterns of existence: birth, life, death, and rebirth. Ra's journey represented cosmic order, and any disruption to this cycle would spell disaster for all creation. Each morning, Ra was born anew from the body of Nut, the sky goddess. Young and vigorous, he began his voyage across the heavens in his solar boat, called the Manjet, or the boat of millions of years. As he sailed across the sky, Ra brought light, heat, as in life to the world below. Plants turned their leaves toward him, animals emerged from their burrows to bask in his warmth, and humans went about their daily tasks under his watchful gaze. Ra did not travel alone. His boat carried an entire divine crew to assist him on his journey. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, served as his scribe and advisor. Maat, goddess of truth and cosmic order, guided the boat along its proper course. Horus stood at the prow as pilot and lookout. The twin lions of yesterday and tomorrow marked the stern and bow of the vessel, symbolizing Ra's mastery over time itself. As the day progressed, Ra aged. The youthful morning sun, called Khepri, depicted as a scarab beetle pushing the sun across the sky, transformed into the mature midday sun, Ra at the height of his power. By late afternoon, he became the elderly Atum, his strength beginning to wane as he approached the western horizon. Egyptian art often depicted this aging process, showing the morning sun as a child, the midday sun as a strong adult, and the evening sun as an elderly man approaching his final hours. This visual metaphor connected the daily solar cycle with the human life cycle, reinforcing the Egyptian understanding that all of existence followed patterns of birth, maturity, decline, and rebirth. As the sun sank below the western horizon, Ra's daytime journey ended, but his work was far from complete. Now began the most perilous part of his cycle, the nighttime voyage through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, a realm of darkness filled with danger and hostile forces. For this nocturnal journey, Ra transferred to another boat called the Mesektet, or evening bark. As he entered the underworld, he merged with Osiris, the ruler of the realm of the dead, becoming Ra, Osiris. This union symbolized how the sun died each evening only to be reborn the following dawn, just as the deceased hoped to achieve rebirth through identification with Osiris. The Duat was divided into 12 regions, corresponding to the 12 hours of the night. In each hour, Ra and his divine crew faced different challenges and enemies. The greatest of these threats was Apophis, or Apep, an enormous serpent who embodied chaos and non-existence. Each night, Apophis attempted to stop Ra's journey by either drinking the waters through which the solar bark sailed or by attacking the boat directly, hoping to swallow the sun and plunge creation into eternal darkness. This nightly battle between Ra and Apophis represented the precarious balance between order and chaos, existence and non-existence. If Apophis were ever to succeed in swallowing the sun, the world would end. Yet despite the serpent's nightly attacks, Ra always triumphed with the help of his divine crew, particularly Seth, who despite his ambiguous moral standing in other myths, served as the primary defender of the solar bark, using his immense strength and ferocity to spear the chaos serpent. Egyptian prayers and rituals often focused on helping Ra overcome Apophis, reflecting the belief that human actions on Earth could influence cosmic events. Priests performed daily rituals in which they symbolically destroyed representations of Apophis by spearing wax figures of the serpent, trampling them underfoot, or burning them in sacred fires. By participating in these rituals, Egyptians believed they were helping to maintain Ma'at, the cosmic order that made existence possible. As Ra journeyed through the hours of the night, he also performed another crucial function, judging and giving life to the souls of the deceased. Those who had lived according to Ma'at were granted eternal life in the afterworld, while those who had violated cosmic order faced a second death, true annihilation. The journey through the Duat was not just a cosmological event, but also a metaphor for the human journey through death toward rebirth. Just as Ra descended into darkness each night, only to emerge reborn at dawn, so too did Egyptians hope to navigate the perils of death and achieve rebirth in the afterlife. In the final hour before dawn, Ra underwent a miraculous transformation. Having grown elderly during his daytime journey and faced countless perils during the night, he now rejuvenated, merging with Capri, the scarab beetle who represented transformation and rebirth. The hieroglyph for Capri's name resembled the word for coming into being, reflecting this deity's association with renewal and resurrection. As the eastern sky began to brighten, Ra emerged once more from the body of Nut, born anew to begin another cycle. This eternal pattern, from dawn to dusk, through the perils of night, and back to rebirth at dawn, formed the fundamental rhythm of existence for ancient Egyptians. It assured them that despite the reality of death, renewal was always possible, that darkness would always give way to light, and that cosmic order would prevail over chaos. The Egyptian concept of time itself was shaped by this cyclical journey. Unlike our linear understanding of time as a progression from past to future, Egyptians conceived of time as both linear and cyclical. Individual lives and historical events unfolded in a linear fashion, but they did so within larger cosmic cycles symbolized by Ra's daily journey. Ra's central importance in Egyptian religion only increased over time. During the 5th dynasty, circa 2494 to 2345 BCE, solar worship became the dominant state religion, with kings building massive sun temples to honor Ra. The pharaoh himself was considered the son of Ra, ruling as his divine representative on earth. Later, Ra merged with other deities, forming syncretic gods like Amun-Ra, who combined the hidden nature of Amun with the visible power of Ra, becoming the king of the gods during the New Kingdom period. This theological development reflected the Egyptian tendency to see different gods not as competing entities, but as complementary aspects of divine reality that could be combined in various ways. Ra's cult center was at Heliopolis, meaning Sun City in Greek, located near modern Cairo. There, priests maintained elaborate rituals to ensure the sun's continued journey. The Benben stone, representing the primeval mound of creation from which Ra first emerged, was housed in the city's main temple, and a sacred bull called Menevis, considered Ra's living manifestation, was kept and worshipped there. As you continue to drift toward sleep, imagine the golden solar bark of Ra sailing across a vast blue Egyptian sky. Think of the countless generations who watch the same sun rise and set, finding in its eternal cycle a promise that darkness is always temporary, that light returns, that life renews itself even after apparent death. Let the rhythm of Ra's journey, the triumphant dawn, the powerful midday, the gentle sunset, and the mysterious night journey become the rhythm of your breathing as you sink deeper into restful sleep. Like Ra merging with Osiris in the depths of night, allow your conscious mind to merge with dreams, knowing that morning's light will bring renewal and awakening. In our next chapter, we will explore the divine couple who embodied wisdom and cosmic order: Thoth, master of knowledge and writing, and Ma'at, the principle of truth and balance that governed the universe. These deities helped maintain the cosmic order that made Ra's journey possible and provided the ethical foundation for Egyptian civilization. As your body relaxes and your mind quiets, let us explore two of the most profound concepts in Egyptian mythology, embodied in the divine figures of Thoth, Lord of Wisdom, and Ma'at, Goddess of Truth and Cosmic Order. Together, these deities represented the intellectual and moral foundations of Egyptian civilization, the principles that gave meaning and structure to existence itself. Thoth, known to the Egyptians as Jehuti, was typically depicted as a man with the head of an ibis, a bird with a distinctive curved beak. Sometimes he appeared as a full ibis or as a baboon, particularly when representing his aspect as the measurer of time. In his hands, he usually carried a writing palette and reed, the tools of a scribe, symbolizing his role as the inventor of writing and the recorder of divine judgments. The ibis, with its curved beak that resembled a crescent moon, connected Thoth to lunar cycles and the measurement of time. The Egyptians observed that baboons would chatter at the rising sun, seeming to greet the dawn, which explained Thoth's alternative baboon form. Both animals shared a connection to wisdom. The ibis was known for its seemingly thoughtful demeanor, while baboons displayed an uncanny, almost human intelligence. Thoth was born in a most unusual manner. According to one myth, when Ra learned that Nut, the sky goddess, was secretly pregnant by Geb, the earth god, he was furious. Ra decreed that Nut could not give birth on any day of the year, which at that time consisted of exactly 360 days. Nut turned to Thoth for help. The wise god played a game of chance with Khonsu, the moon god, and won from him enough light to create 5 additional days outside the regular calendar. During these 5 epigomenal days, Nut was able to give birth to her 5 children: Osiris, Isis, Seth, Nephthys, and in some versions, Horus the Elder. And as a reward for his cleverness, Thoth was said to have received the moon as his domain, becoming the lunar counterpart to Ra's solar power. Where Ra represented direct illumination and visible authority, Thoth embodied reflected wisdom and hidden knowledge. This complementary relationship was essential to Egyptian cosmology, which understood the universe as a balanced system of paired forces. Thoth's primary role was as the deity of wisdom, writing, and knowledge. He invented hieroglyphs, the sacred writing system that the Egyptians called the words of the gods. This gift of writing allowed humans to record their history, preserve their knowledge, and communicate across time and space. For a civilization as focused on permanence and memory as ancient Egypt, this was a divine gift of inestimable value. As the scribe of the gods, Thoth recorded the words spoken at the divine tribunal, particularly during the judgment of the dead. His precision and impartiality were legendary. What Thoth wrote became the definitive record, unchangeable and eternal. This association with unbiased recording made him a natural patron of scribes, who in Egyptian society held positions of great respect and authority as the keepers and transmitters of knowledge. Thoth was also the keeper of divine wisdom, possessing knowledge of magic and secret rituals that even the other gods did not fully comprehend. His sacred books were said to contain formulas of such power that they could control the elements, command animals, and even influence the gods themselves. Legend held that Thoth had written 42 books containing all wisdom, including secret magical knowledge. Whoever mastered these texts would wield power greater than any king or priest. In the story of Isis and Ra, Thoth's power as the keeper of divine names became apparent. According to this myth, Isis wished to gain power equal to Ra's. Knowing that Ra's secret name contained his essence and power, she created a serpent from Ra's own spittle and placed it where the sun god would tread. When Ra was bitten, no ordinary healing could save him. Only if he revealed his secret name to Isis could the poison be neutralized. Reluctantly, Ra whispered his true name to Isis, transferring some of his power to her. This knowledge of true names and their power was one of Thoth's domains. He knew the true names of all things, giving him mastery over reality itself. Beyond his role as a keeper of knowledge, Thoth was a healer and mediator. When Horus lost his eye in battle with Seth, it was Thoth who restored it, making it whole again through his magical knowledge. When divine conflicts threatened cosmic order, Thoth often served as the voice of reason and compromise, suggesting solutions that maintained balance rather than allowing one force to dominate completely. This mediating role reflected the Egyptian understanding that cosmic harmony required not the triumph of one principle over another, but the balanced interaction of complementary forces. Light and dark, order and chaos, life and death, all were necessary components of existence, and Thoth's wisdom lay in recognizing the proper relationship between these opposing principles. If Thoth represented divine wisdom and knowledge, Ma'at embodied the cosmic order that this wisdom served. Ma'at was both a goddess and an abstract concept, one of the most fundamental principles in Egyptian thought. As a goddess, she was depicted as a woman wearing a tall feather on her head, often shown with wings outstretched in a protective posture. As a concept, Ma'at encompassed truth, justice, cosmic order, balance, and moral rightness, the underlying principles that made existence possible and meaningful. The hieroglyph for Ma'at was a pedestal or base, symbolizing the foundation upon which everything else rested. Without Ma'at, the Egyptians believed, the universe would dissolve back into chaos. The sun would not rise, the Nile would not flood, plants would not grow, and human society would collapse into violence and disorder. Everything depended on the maintenance of Ma'at. In creation myths, Ma'at was said to have been established at the very beginning of time, when the creator deity separated order from chaos and set the cosmos in motion. Each morning, when Ra emerged from the underworld, he was said to bring forth Ma'at, reestablishing cosmic order for another day. The pharaoh, as the living Horus and son of Ra, was responsible for maintaining Ma'at within Egyptian society through proper governance, religious observance, and ethical behavior. Ma'at was not an abstract philosophical concept, but a living principle that affected every aspect of Egyptian life. In practical terms, living according to Ma'at meant dealing honestly with others, showing proper respect to gods and ancestors, fulfilling one's social obligations, and maintaining harmony in one's community. These ethical dimensions made Ma'at the foundation of Egyptian morality and social cohesion. Nowhere was Ma'at's significance more evident than in the weighing of the heart ceremony, the central judgment that determined a soul's fate in the afterlife. As depicted in the Book of the Dead, this ceremony took place in the Hall of Two Truths, where Osiris presided as judge of the dead, with Thoth standing by as recorder. The deceased's heart, representing their moral essence, was placed on one side of a great scale. On the other side sat the feather of Ma'at. If the heart balanced perfectly against the feather, it meant the deceased had lived in accordance with Ma'at and was worthy of eternal life in the field of reeds, the Egyptian paradise. If the heart was heavier than the feather, weighed down by sin and wrongdoing, it would be devoured by Ammit, the fearsome devourer of hearts, a hybrid creature with the head of a crocodile, the forequarters of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. This second death meant complete annihilation, the worst fate an Egyptian could imagine. Before the weighing, the deceased was expected to recite the negative confession, a declaration of innocence in which they denied having committed various sins against Ma'at. This confession, recorded in the Book of the Dead, provides insight into what the Egyptians considered ethical behavior. I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not lied, I have not caused pain, I have not diminished food offerings, I have not transgressed, and so on through 42 declarations, each addressed to a specific deity overseeing that aspect of moral behavior. Thoth, as the divine scribe, recorded the result of the weighing. His judgment was final and incontestable. If the deceased passed the test, Thoth would announce to Osiris, "His heart is true and righteous. He has not sinned. He has not wronged anyone. Therefore, Ammit should have no power over him." The deceased would then join Osiris in eternal life. And together, Thoth and Ma'at represented the intellectual and moral pillars of Egyptian civilization. Thoth embodied wisdom, the accumulation and application of knowledge for the benefit of gods and humans alike. Ma'at represented the purpose of that wisdom, the maintenance of cosmic order, justice, and ethical behavior. Without wisdom, order could not be maintained. Without order, wisdom had no purpose or direction. This complementary relationship extended to their roles in Ra's solar bark. Thoth served as navigator, using his knowledge to guide the boat safely through its journey. Ma'at stood at the prow, her presence ensuring that the boat followed its proper course through the cosmos. Their cooperation made Ra's journey possible, just as wisdom and moral order made human civilization possible. For the Egyptians, Thoth and Ma'at were not distant abstractions, but living presences in their daily lives. Scribes invoked Thoth before beginning their work, asking for precision and clarity. Judges called upon Ma'at to guide their decisions. Ordinary people sought to live according to Ma'at in their personal conduct, knowing that this alignment with cosmic order would bring harmony in this life and salvation in the next. Even the pharaoh, with all his power, was subject to these principles. In the Instructions for Merikare, a Middle Kingdom wisdom text, the king is reminded, "Do Ma'at whilst thou art upon earth, for a man's virtue is more valuable than water. Do Ma'at than thou endurest on earth. Calm the weeper, do not oppress the widow, supplant no man in the property of his father. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the ibis-headed Thoth recording the events of your day in his eternal scroll, his sharp eyes missing nothing, but his judgment tempered with wisdom and compassion. Picture Ma'at with her feather of truth, not as a harsh judge, but as a guide showing the path to harmony and balance. In the gentle weight of her feather is the promise that living with truth and justice brings peace in this world and the next. In our next chapter, we will explore two beloved goddesses who brought joy, protection, and healing to both gods and humans: Hathor, mistress of love and music, and Bastet, the protective cat goddess who guarded homes and families from harm. As your body settles deeper into comfort and your mind continues its gentle journey through the world of Egyptian mythology, let us turn our attention to two beloved goddesses who brought joy, protection, and healing to the lives of both gods and humans: Hathor, mistress of love and celebration, and Bastet, the feline protector of homes and families. In the complex tapestry of Egyptian religion, these two goddesses represented the gentler aspects of divine power, the nurturing feminine energies that sustained life and made it worth living. Yet beneath their benevolent aspects lay tremendous power that, if provoked, could transform from protective to destructive in an instant. Hathor, whose name means House of Horus, was one of Egypt's most ancient and beloved goddesses. Her worship dates back to pre-dynastic times, making her one of the oldest deities in the Egyptian pantheon. She was typically depicted in one of three forms: as a woman with the ears of a cow and a headdress of horns enclosing a solar disk, as a full cow, or as a woman with a sistrum, a sacred musical rattle. As her name suggests, Hathor was closely associated with Horus, sometimes as his wife, sometimes as his mother, and sometimes as his daughter, reflecting the fluid nature of divine relationships in Egyptian theology. She was also considered a daughter of Ra and would take the form of a cat to protect him from the serpent Apophis during the sun god's nightly journey through the underworld. Above all, Hathor was the goddess of love, beauty, music, dance, and joy. She embodied the life-affirming pleasures that made existence worthwhile: the laughter of friends sharing a feast, the intoxication of good wine, the ecstasy of music and dance, the passion between lovers. Her priests and priestesses were skilled musicians and dancers who used rhythm and movement to invoke the goddess's presence in temple rituals. The sistrum, a rattle made of metal loops on a handled frame, was her sacred instrument. When shaken, it produced a sound believed to please the goddess and drive away evil spirits. The sistrum's jangling music represented the life-giving sound of rushing water, connecting Hathor to the annual flood of the Nile that renewed the land. Hathor was also the patron goddess of miners and artisans who worked with precious metals and stones. As the Golden One, she was associated with gold, turquoise, and malachite. Miners venturing into the harsh deserts and mountains of Egypt's eastern borders would invoke her protection before entering the dangerous depths of the earth. Her temple at Dendera contained workshops where her priests crafted precious ritual objects and musical instruments for her worship. For women, Hathor held special significance as the guardian of feminine mysteries. She presided over conception, pregnancy, and childbirth, helping mothers safely bring new life into the world. Women would pray to her for fertility and easy delivery, offering her mirrors, jewelry, and cosmetics, objects associated with feminine beauty and power. Hathor's nurturing aspect extended to the afterlife as well. Known as the Lady of the West, she welcomed the deceased to the afterworld, emerging from the western desert mountains to offer sustenance and comfort to souls beginning their journey to eternity. In tomb paintings, she was often shown as a cow, offering her milk to the deceased to nourish them in the afterlife, or as a woman presenting the Ankh, symbol of life, to the soul. But beneath Hathor's benevolent, life affirming nature lay a dangerous aspect that emerged when cosmic order was threatened. This wrathful side of the goddess was personified as Sekhmet, the lion headed goddess of destruction. The transformation of Hathor into Sekhmet forms one of the most dramatic tales in Egyptian mythology, the story known as the destruction of mankind. According to this myth, humanity had once plotted rebellion against the aging sun god Ra. Learning of this betrayal, Ra summoned the divine council and asked what should be done about ungrateful humans. The gods suggested punishment, and Ra turned his gaze upon Hathor, transforming the gentle cow goddess into the fierce lioness Sekhmet, tasking her with slaughtering the rebellious humans. Sekhmet, whose name means the powerful one, descended upon humanity with terrible fury. She rampaged across the land, slaughtering rebels and loyal subjects alike, her bloodlust growing with each life she took. She waded through rivers of blood, delighting in destruction, her rampage so complete that it threatened to annihilate humanity entirely. Seeing that his punishment had gone too far, Ra devised a plan to halt Sekhmet's rampage. He ordered his servants to brew 7,000 jars of beer, which they mixed with pomegranate juice to give it the red color of blood, and spread this mixture across the fields where Sekhmet planned to continue her slaughter. Arriving at dawn, the bloodthirsty goddess saw what appeared to be a lake of blood. She eagerly began to drink, consuming so much of the disguised beer that she became intoxicated and forgot her mission of destruction. As the alcohol took effect, her fierce nature softened, and she transformed back into gentle Hathor, sparing what remained of humanity. This myth highlights the duality within Hathor, the nurturing, joyful aspect that sustained life and the destructive potential that could end it. The Egyptians recognized that the same solar energy that nourished crops could also create drought and famine, that the Nile, which brought fertility, could also bring devastating floods. Divine power was understood as inherently dual, capable of both creation and destruction. To commemorate Sekhmet's pacification, Egyptians held an annual festival of drunkenness, during which worshippers would drink to the point of intoxication, symbolically reenacting the salvation of humanity. This controlled ritual excess served as a reminder of the thin line between joy and destruction, celebration and chaos. Like Hathor, Bastet also embodied this duality of nurturing protection and fierce defense. Originally known as Bast, she was depicted in early Egyptian history as a lioness warrior goddess, a fierce defender similar to Sekhmet. Over time, her image softened, and by the late period of Egyptian history, she was most commonly represented as a domestic cat or as a woman with the head of a cat, often holding a sistrum and an aegis, a shield like amulet. As the goddess evolved from lioness to house cat, her nature shifted from fierce warrior to protective guardian of home and hearth. Yet, even in her gentler form, Bastet retained the potential for sudden violence that anyone who has observed a domestic cat knows well, the ability to transition from perfect calm to deadly predator in an instant when threatened. Bastet was primarily associated with protection of the home, women, and children. Cats were venerated in Egypt not only for their grace and beauty, but for their practical value in controlling vermin that threatened stored grain. A cat protecting a granary from mice was seen as Bastet herself, defending the household from hunger. Families kept cats as both pets and living symbols of the goddess's protective presence. The center of Bastet's worship was the city of Bubastis in the Nile Delta, where a magnificent temple was dedicated to her. The Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, described the annual festival of Bastet as the most popular in Egypt. According to his account, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims would travel by boat to Bubastis, drinking, making music, and celebrating wildly throughout the journey. Upon arrival, they would make offerings to the goddess and participate in feasting, dancing, and ritual intoxication. Like the festivals of Hathor, Bastet's celebrations combined religious devotion with joyful, sometimes excessive merrymaking. The connection between Bastet and Hathor went beyond their shared association with music, celebration, and protective female energy. Both goddesses could manifest as the Eye of Ra, the extension of the sun god's power that acted as his agent in the world. In this role, they protected Ra from his enemies, but could also potentially turn against him if provoked, requiring careful propitiation through ritual offerings and celebrations. The cult of Bastet reached its height during the late period of Egyptian history, when cats were mummified by the thousands as offerings to the goddess. At Bubastis and other cult centers, vast cat cemeteries have been discovered, containing carefully prepared feline mummies, some adorned with gilded masks or wrapped in decorated linens. The killing of a cat, even accidentally, was considered a grave offense, potentially punishable by death. When a family cat died of natural causes, its human family would shave their eyebrows as a sign of mourning and bring the cat's body to be embalmed and buried in a sacred cemetery. For ordinary Egyptians, Bastet was perhaps the most accessible of all the great goddesses. While the state religion focused on cosmic deities like Amun-Ra or Osiris, whose temples were often restricted to priests and royalty, Bastet dwelled in the home, protecting the family's health, prosperity, and happiness. Small amulets and figurines of the cat goddess were among the most common household items, placed in homes to invoke her protection against disease, venomous creatures, and evil spirits. Bastet was particularly associated with the protection of women and children, guarding them during the vulnerable times of pregnancy, childbirth, and infancy. Women would wear amulets of Bastet during pregnancy and place them in children's cradles for protection. As a mother goddess, Bastet was sometimes depicted with a litter of kittens, symbolizing fertility and nurturing care. Together, Hathor and Bastet represented the joy and security that made life worth living, the pleasure of music and dance, the warmth of love and wine, the security of a protected home, the miracle of birth and new life. Their worship reminded Egyptians that the divine was present not only in grand temples and cosmic events, but in the simple pleasures and mundane securities of daily existence. As your consciousness drifts ever closer to the realm of dreams, imagine the gentle presence of Hathor, with her cow's ears and kind eyes, offering the sustaining milk of comfort and joy. Picture Bastet, alert and watchful, curled protectively at the foot of your bed, her feline presence warding off any disturbances that might interrupt your peaceful slumber. In the soft darkness behind your eyelids, see the sistrum of Hathor gently shaking, its metal loops creating a soothing lullaby. Feel the warm reassurance of Bastet's purr, vibrating with healing energy that dissolves tension and invites deep, restorative rest. These goddesses, who brought joy and protection to the ancient Egyptians, extend their benevolent presence to you now, guarding your dreams and promising renewal with the coming dawn. In our next chapter, we will explore the realm of Anubis, the jackal headed god of mummification and guide to the afterlife, as we delve into Egyptian concepts of death, preservation, and the journey to eternal life. As your consciousness drifts between wakefulness and sleep, let us venture into one of the most fascinating aspects of Egyptian mythology, the realm of death, preservation, and the journey to eternal life. Our guide into this mysterious domain is Anubis, the jackal headed god who has become perhaps the most recognizable symbol of ancient Egyptian funerary practices. In the soft darkness behind your closed eyelids, imagine a figure emerging from the shadows, tall and imposing, with the sleek black head of a wild canine atop a human body. This is Anubis, or Anpu as the Egyptians called him, guardian of the cemetery, overseer of embalming, and guide to souls in their journey through the afterlife. Anubis was typically depicted as a man with the head of a jackal or wild dog, his body painted or wrapped in black, the color of death and rebirth. Sometimes he appeared as a full jackal, prowling cemetery grounds. The choice of a jackal or wild dog as his symbol was no accident. These animals were often seen near the edges of the desert, where Egyptians buried their dead, scavenging among the tombs. Rather than viewing this as desecration, the Egyptians transformed it into divine protection. By associating these animals with a powerful deity, they ensured that Anubis would guard the deceased rather than allow their bodies to be consumed. The origins of Anubis are ancient, predating even the worship of Osiris. In the earliest Egyptian funerary texts, it is Anubis, not Osiris, who presides as the primary god of the dead. As the cult of Osiris grew in prominence during the Middle Kingdom, Anubis assumed a subordinate but still crucial role. He became the faithful servant of Osiris, using his specialized knowledge of preservation and funeral rites to prepare the dead for judgment and potential rebirth. In the evolving mythology, Anubis was said to be the son of Osiris and Nephthys. According to this tale, Nephthys, wife of Seth, disguised herself as Isis to seduce Osiris, perhaps out of loneliness or desire for a child. From this union, Anubis was born, but Nephthys, fearful of her husband's wrath, abandoned the infant in the marshes. Isis, ever compassionate, found the child and raised him as her own. This adoption created the loyal bond between Anubis and the divine family of Osiris, explaining why he became their staunch protector and servant. When Osiris was murdered by Seth, it was Anubis who helped Isis preserve her husband's body. Drawing on his innate knowledge of preservation, Anubis developed the process of mummification, creating the first mummy and establishing the funeral rites that would be followed for thousands of years. This act of preserving Osiris became the template for all Egyptian funeral practices thereafter. For the Egyptians, proper preservation of the body was essential for survival in the afterlife. They believed that the human being consisted of several elements: the physical body, Kat, the shadow, Kybit, the name, Ren, the life force, Ke, the personality or soul, Ba, and the immortal spirit, Ak. For these elements to reunite in the afterlife, allowing the deceased to live eternally, the physical body needed to be preserved as a dwelling place for the Ke and a recognizable form for the Be to identify. This is where Anubis's role became crucial, as the lord of the sacred land, the necropolis, and he who is upon his mountain, watching over the cemetery from the desert cliffs. Anubis oversaw every aspect of the complex mummification process. This process typically took 70 days to complete and involved specialized priests wearing jackal masks, symbolically taking on the role of Anubis himself. The mummification process began with purification. The body was washed with natron, a natural salt mixture, and palm wine. Then the internal organs, with the exception of the heart, which was believed to be the seat of the soul and intelligence, were removed. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were preserved separately in 4 specialized containers called canopic jars, each protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus. The body cavity was then cleaned with palm wine, packed with temporary stuffing, and covered with natron to draw out moisture. After 40 days of desiccation, the body was washed again, packed with permanent stuffing of sawdust, linen, and aromatic substances, and carefully wrapped in layers of linen bandages. Throughout this wrapping, protective amulets were placed within the bandages, and priests recited spells from the Book of the Dead to ensure safe passage to the afterlife. During this elaborate process, it was believed that Anubis himself watched over the deceased, ensuring that each step was performed correctly. Embalmers worked under his protection, invoking his name before beginning their sacred work. A prayer to Anubis from this period reads, "Hail to you, Anubis, who is upon his hill, Imi-Ut, Lord of the sacred land. I have come to you that you may..." Once mummification was complete, Anubis's role continued with the opening of the mouth ceremony. This crucial ritual, depicted on many tomb walls, reanimated the deceased's mummy, restoring the abilities to speak, eat, breathe, and use all their senses in the afterlife. Priests, again taking on the role of Anubis, touched specialized tools to the mummy's mouth, eyes, and other sensory organs, ritually reactivating them for use in eternity. After proper burial, Anubis's most important role began, guiding the deceased through the dangers of the underworld. The journey to the afterlife was perilous, filled with hostile entities and challenging obstacles. The Egyptians believed that without proper knowledge and protection, a soul could become lost forever in these dangers, suffering a second and permanent death. To navigate these perils, the deceased needed to know specific spells and declarations, which were provided in funerary texts like the Book of Coming Forth by Day, commonly known as the Book of the Dead. These texts were essentially guidebooks to the afterlife, containing maps of the underworld, spells to overcome obstacles, and the crucial knowledge needed to pass the final judgment. Anubis was often invoked in these texts as a protector and guide who would lead worthy souls safely through danger. The culmination of this journey was the weighing of the heart ceremony, in which Anubis played a pivotal role. In the Hall of Two Truths, before the throne of Osiris, stood the scales of justice. Anubis led the deceased to these scales, where their heart, representing their moral essence, would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, truth and cosmic order. Anubis carefully adjusted the scales to ensure a fair measurement, his steady hands guiding the balance that would determine eternal destiny. If the heart balanced perfectly against the feather, demonstrating that the deceased had lived in accordance with Ma'at, they would be declared true of voice and admitted to the paradise of the field of reeds. If the heart was heavier than the feather, weighed down by sin and wrongdoing, it would be devoured by Ammit, resulting in the soul's annihilation. This judgment scene, depicted countless times in Egyptian funerary art, shows Anubis in his most solemn role, not as a fearsome deity of death, but as a fair judge who ensures that cosmic justice is maintained even in the afterlife. His presence at this crucial moment was reassuring rather than frightening. He was there not to condemn, but to ensure that those who had lived righteously received their just reward. For ordinary Egyptians, Anubis was a complex figure who inspired both reverence and comfort. Far from being feared as a harbinger of death, he was welcomed as a protector who ensured the deceased would reach the afterlife safely. Amulets of Anubis were commonly placed with the dead to invoke his protection during their journey, and prayers to him were an essential part of funeral ceremonies. One beautiful prayer addressed to Anubis reads, "Hail to you, Anubis, who counts the hearts, who loves Maat and detests falsehood. Guide me on the beautiful paths of the West, that I may join the revered ones who reside in eternity. May my name endure like the stars. May my spirit shine like the sun. May I go forth by day and return by night, a blessed spirit in the realm of Osiris." The Egyptian concept of the afterlife was not a shadowy, diminished existence like the Greek Hades or Hebrew Sheol, but a perfected version of earthly life. In the field of reeds, the blessed dead would enjoy all the pleasures they had known in life: eating, drinking, making music, spending time with loved ones, but without pain, illness, or fear of further death. The sun always shone, the harvest was always abundant, and joy was unending. To reach this paradise required proper preparation of the body, knowledge of the underworld's geography and challenges, and most importantly, a life lived in accordance with Ma'at. Anubis ensured that those who met these requirements would achieve the eternal life they sought. In this sense, he was not a god of death, but a god of eternal life, the skilled technician whose knowledge of preservation and ritual made immortality possible. Even as Egyptian religion evolved over thousands of years, Anubis maintained his essential role. When Greek rule came to Egypt in the Ptolemaic period, Anubis was associated with Hermes, Mercury to the Romans, another guide of souls, creating the syncretic deity Hermanubis. Under Roman rule, his cult spread throughout the Mediterranean world, his distinctive jackal-headed image appearing as far away as Britain and Germany. Today, thousands of years after the last priests of Anubis performed the sacred rituals of mummification, his image remains one of the most recognizable symbols of ancient Egypt. Modern viewers are still captivated by the sleek, canine-headed figure who stands at the boundary between life and death, between the known and the unknown, guiding souls on their final journey. As you drift closer to sleep, that liminal state between consciousness and dreams, imagine Anubis standing watch at the threshold, not as a figure to be feared, but as a compassionate guide who ensures safe passage through the darkness. Picture his jackal ears alert for any danger, his knowing eyes seeing paths invisible to others, his steady hands ready to guide you through the dream world as he once guided the ancient Egyptians through the afterlife. In our next chapter, we will explore the profound connection between Egyptians and the animal kingdom, examining how various sacred animals came to embody divine qualities and serve as living manifestations of the gods themselves. As your mind continues its gentle drift toward sleep, let us explore one of the most distinctive aspects of Egyptian religious thought: the profound connection between divinity and the animal world. Unlike many other ancient cultures that placed humans at the pinnacle of creation, separate from other living beings, the Egyptians recognized the sacred qualities inherent in various animals, seeing in them perfect embodiments of divine principles that transcended human understanding. Throughout the Nile Valley, from the marshy delta to the arid southern border, Egyptians revered certain animals as living manifestations of the gods themselves. This was not simple animal worship, as some early scholars mistakenly believed, but a sophisticated theological concept based on the understanding that the divine could express itself through multiple forms simultaneously, in the heavens, in sacred images, and in living creatures that displayed particular attributes associated with specific deities. The relationship between gods and their sacred animals took various forms. Some deities were depicted with animal heads on human bodies, symbolizing the melding of animal instinct with human reason. Others appeared in full animal form, or occasionally in fully human form, demonstrating the fluid nature of divine manifestation. Certain animals were considered sacred to particular gods without being direct manifestations, more like beloved companions or servants of the deity. Among the most revered of all sacred animals was the Apis bull, the living embodiment of the creator god Ptah, and later associated with Osiris as Osiris Apis, eventually syncretized by the Greeks as the deity Serapis. The apis was a carefully selected black bull with distinctive white markings, including a triangle on its forehead and a vulture or eagle shape on its back. Only one bull held this sacred position at a time, chosen from calves throughout Egypt based on these specific markings, which were believed to be divine signs. When an Apis bull was discovered, it was brought to Memphis with great ceremony and installed in a special sanctuary where it lived in luxury, receiving offerings, participating in religious festivals, and providing oracles to those seeking divine guidance. Its movements were interpreted as omens, its appetite as a sign of Egypt's prosperity, and its very breath was considered healing. When an Apis died, it was mourned throughout Egypt with the same elaborate rituals accorded to a pharaoh, undergoing mummification and burial in massive granite sarcophagi in the Serapeum, a vast underground complex at Saqqara. Similar to the Apis was the Menevis bull of Heliopolis, sacred to Ra, and the Buchis bull of Hermonthis, associated with Montu, the war god. These sacred bulls represented masculine generative power, strength, and fertility, qualities essential for the continuation of life and the prosperity of Egypt. While bulls represented raw power and virility, other animals embodied different divine qualities. The ibis and baboon, both sacred to Thoth, symbolized wisdom and intellectual acuity. Ibises, with their curved beaks reminiscent of a scribe's writing tool and their thoughtful, deliberate movements, perfectly captured Thoth's association with writing and measured judgment. Baboons, observed greeting the rising sun with upraised arms and enthusiastic cries, connected Thoth to solar worship and timekeeping. In temples dedicated to Thoth, sacred ibises were kept in large aviaries, their mummified remains later interred in special animal necropolises. At Tuna el Gabel, archaeologists have discovered millions of mummified ibises, carefully prepared and placed in clay pots as offerings to Thoth. Similarly, at North Saqqara, vast catacombs contain mummified baboons, some wearing special silver amulets, marking them as particularly sacred individuals. Perhaps no animal was more widely venerated throughout Egypt than the cat, sacred to the goddess Bastet. As we discussed in an earlier chapter, cats were valued not only for their grace and beauty, but for their practical role in protecting grain stores from rodents and snakes. The cat's ability to see in near darkness, its cleanliness, its maternal protectiveness toward kittens, and its combination of gentle domesticity with sudden ferocity when threatened all aligned perfectly with Bastet's dual nature as both nurturer and defender. Cats living in the temples of Bastet were considered especially sacred, but all cats throughout Egypt received a measure of divine respect. The killing of a cat, even accidentally, was considered a serious offense. Herodotus recounts an incident where a Roman accidentally killed an Egyptian cat, sparking a riot that resulted in his death, despite attempts by Egyptian officials to protect him. While this story may be exaggerated, it reflects the extraordinary reverence accorded to these animals. When a household cat died, the family members would shave their eyebrows as a sign of mourning. The cat's body would be mummified, sometimes elaborately with a gilded mask and painted wrappings, and brought to a sacred cemetery for burial. Archaeologists have discovered vast cat necropolises at Bubastis, Saqqara, and other sites, containing hundreds of thousands of carefully prepared feline mummies. DNA analysis of these remains has revealed that some cats were bred specifically for temple sacrifice, highlighting the economic dimension of animal cults in ancient Egypt. The falcon, sacred to Horus, represented divine kingship, keen vision, and swift, decisive action. Living falcons were kept in temple aviaries, and particularly magnificent specimens were considered direct embodiments of the god. Their sharp eyes, unmatched in the animal kingdom, symbolized the all seeing nature of both Horus and the pharaoh, his earthly manifestation. Mummified falcons, like ibises and cats, have been found by the thousands in sacred animal cemeteries. Crocodiles held a more ambiguous status in Egyptian religion. In some regions, particularly the Fayum, they were revered as manifestations of Sobek, the fertility god associated with the Nile's life giving waters. In these areas, sacred crocodiles were kept in temple pools, adorned with gold jewelry and fed choice meats bused by priests. And upon death, they received elaborate mummification and burial. The crocodile's ferocity and its ability to move effortlessly between land and water made it a perfect symbol for the Nile's dual nature as both nurturing provider and dangerous force. In other parts of Egypt, however, crocodiles were associated with Seth and viewed as dangerous embodiments of chaos. This regional variation in the interpretation of animal symbolism reflects the complex and non dogmatic nature of Egyptian religion, where local traditions could coexist with broader national beliefs. The ram, with its impressive curved horns, was sacred to several Egyptian deities, including Amun, Khnum, and Banabjadet. At Amun's temple in Karnak, sacred rams were kept as living manifestations of the god. When they died, they were mummified and buried with honor, their curved horns symbolizing both divine fertility and the circular nature of existence. The ram's association with aggressive sexuality and reproductive power made it an appropriate symbol for creator deities who continually renewed the cosmos through divine generation. Among the most enigmatic of sacred animals was the Bennu bird, associated with creation and rebirth, which may have been the inspiration for the later Greek legend of the phoenix. Described as a heron-like bird with magnificent plumage, the Bennu was said to have flown over the waters of Nun at the beginning of time, its cry breaking the primordial silence and initiating creation. Its periodic renewal through immolation and rebirth from its own ashes, in later Greek versions, symbolized the Egyptian preoccupation with cyclical time and eternal recurrence. Serpents held a particularly complex position in Egyptian religious thought. On one hand, the cobra, or uraeus, adorned the brow of both pharaohs and solar deities as a protective symbol, representing the goddess Wajet, fierce defender of Lower Egypt. The cobra's ability to rear up and spread its hood when threatened, combined with its deadly venom, made it a perfect embodiment of protective divine wrath. On the other hand, the serpent Apophis represented the ultimate cosmic threat, constantly attempting to devour Ra's solar bark and return creation to chaos. This duality reflects the Egyptian understanding that the same natural force could be either protective or destructive depending on context and alignment with Ma'at. The hippopotamus, like the crocodile, had a dual nature in Egyptian symbolism. The goddess Taweret appeared as a pregnant hippopotamus standing upright, a protective deity who safeguarded women in childbirth. Yet male hippopotami were associated with Seth and considered dangerous embodiments of chaos, hunted by the pharaoh in ritual demonstrations of his power to maintain cosmic order by subduing chaos. The care and maintenance of sacred animals became increasingly elaborate during Egypt's later periods, particularly during Ptolemaic times, when animal cults reached their peak of popularity. Vast temple complexes employed hundreds of priests and attendants dedicated solely to the care of sacred creatures. Special breeding programs ensured a steady supply of animals with the proper markings, and enormous resources were dedicated to their mummification and burial. This flourishing of animal cults served multiple purposes. For ordinary Egyptians, offering a mummified animal to its associated deity provided an accessible way to communicate with the divine realm without the need for expensive statues or the services of high ranking priests. For the temple economy, the production and sale of animal mummies created a steady revenue stream that supported religious institutions during times of political change. The Greek writer Diodorus Siculus, who visited Egypt in the 1st century BCE, expressed amazement at the resources dedicated to animal cults. The care which the Egyptians lavish on cats is beyond telling. When a fire occurs, the Egyptians are much more concerned to save the cats than to extinguish the fire, and when a cat dies, they shave their eyebrows. And those who kill a cat, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, are put to death. While Diodorus's account likely exaggerates, it reflects the genuine astonishment outsiders felt at Egypt's reverence for animals. This attitude was often misunderstood by foreign visitors who failed to recognize the sophisticated theology behind the practice. The animals themselves were not gods. Rather, they were living vessels capable of embodying divine presence in the physical world, bridges between the realm of gods and the realm of humans. This profound respect for the animal kingdom extended beyond religious practice into broader Egyptian attitudes toward nature. Unlike many later civilizations that viewed nature primarily as a resource to be exploited, the Egyptians recognized their dependency on and integration with the natural world. The annual flood of the Nile, the migration of birds, the behavior of animals, all were part of a sacred cosmic order in which humans were participants, not masters. As you sink deeper into the peaceful embrace of sleep, imagine the sacred ibis of Thoth standing in meditative stillness at the edge of a marshy pool, its curved beak and thoughtful mien embodying divine wisdom. Picture the protective cat of Bastet curled at the foot of your bed, its gentle purr creating a shield of comfort around your dreams. Feel the kingly presence of Horus's falcon soaring high above, keeping watch with keen eyes that miss nothing. In recognizing the sacred in animals, the Egyptians reminded us that divinity expresses itself through all forms of life, that consciousness and spirit are not uniquely human attributes, but qualities shared in different measures by all living beings. This inclusive vision of the sacred, embracing all of nature within its scope, offers a profound perspective that still resonates in our world today. In our next chapter, we will explore the divine nature of Egyptian kingship, examining how pharaohs straddled the worlds of gods and humans, serving as crucial intermediaries who maintained cosmic order through their sacred office. As your mind continues its peaceful journey deeper into relaxation, let us explore one of the most fascinating aspects of Egyptian religious thought, the divine nature of kingship. In the shadowy space between gods and humans stood the pharaoh, neither fully mortal nor completely divine, but a crucial intermediary whose sacred office maintained the delicate balance between the cosmic and earthly realms. Unlike modern rulers, who derive their legitimacy from constitutions, elections, or hereditary succession alone, the Egyptian pharaoh ruled by divine right in its most literal sense. The pharaoh was not merely chosen by the gods or blessed by them. In Egyptian theological understanding, the pharaoh was a god incarnate walking on earth, a living manifestation of divine power in human form. This concept of divine kingship emerged in Egypt's earliest dynastic period and remained central to Egyptian governance for over 3,000 years, evolving and adapting across dynasties, but never losing its essential character. At the heart of this theology lay a profound understanding of the pharaoh's dual nature, both divine and human, both Horus and the son of Osiris, both the image of perfection and a mortal being subject to human frailties. In the most fundamental formulation of royal theology, the living pharaoh was the earthly embodiment of Horus, the falcon headed god who represented divine kingship. As we learned in earlier chapters, Horus was the son of Osiris and Isis, who avenged his father's murder and rightfully claimed the throne of Egypt. Every pharaoh, from the unification of Egypt until the Ptolemaic period, bore the title Living Horus, indicating that the god himself was present within the royal person. When the pharaoh died, he ceased to be Horus and instead became one with Osiris, the ruler of the afterlife. His successor then took on the mantle of Horus, continuing the eternal cycle of divine kingship. This Osiris-Horus-Osiris pattern created an unbroken chain of divine authority stretching across generations, linking each ruler to both his predecessors and successors through shared divine identity. Alongside this identification with Horus, the pharaoh was also considered the son of Ra, the sun god. From the 5th dynasty onward, pharaohs added son of Ra to their royal titulary, claiming direct divine parentage. This solar aspect of royal divinity emphasized the pharaoh's role as sustainer of life and order, just as the sun maintained cosmic patterns through its daily journey. To reinforce this divine parentage, a complex myth of royal birth developed, depicted in elaborate sequences on temple walls throughout Egypt. According to this divine birth myth, the supreme god, whether Amun, Ra, or another creator deity, would become enamored with the queen, the royal wife of the current pharaoh. Taking on the exact appearance of the king, the god would visit the queen, who recognized her divine visitor despite his earthly disguise. From their sacred union, a divine child would be conceived, the future pharaoh, who would carry the god's essence within his mortal body. The god would then announce to the queen that she would bear a son who would rule Egypt as the god's representative, bestowing upon the unborn child royal titles and promising divine protection throughout his life. This divine birth story served multiple theological purposes. It established the pharaoh's legitimacy as both divine offspring and legitimate royal heir. It preserved the queen's virtue while explaining the pharaoh's dual nature. Most importantly, it created a direct connection between the cosmic realm of the gods and the political realm of royal succession. One of the most complete versions of this myth appears in the temples at Deir el-Bahari and Luxor, depicting the divine birth of Queen Hatshepsut and Amenhotep III, respectively. In these elaborate relief sequences, Amun-Ra approaches Queen Ahmos, Hatshepsut's mother, or Queen Mutmuia, Amenhotep's mother, who conceives through divine contact. The god Khnum, divine potter, then shapes the child in its ka, life force, on his wheel, before the mother gives birth, assisted by goddesses, including Hathor and Taweret. Interestingly, despite these mythical origins, Egyptian kingship generally followed human patterns of inheritance. Most pharaohs were the biological sons of their predecessors, and legitimate royal blood, particularly through the female line, was considered essential for royal succession. The divine birth myth did not replace or negate human parentage, but existed alongside it, explaining the pharaoh's spiritual essence rather than his physical conception. From the moment of coronation, the pharaoh ceased to be merely human. The elaborate coronation rituals transformed the royal person into a liminal being who could move between divine and human worlds. During these ceremonies, the new king received the royal regalia, the crook and flail symbolizing his role as shepherd and disciplinarian of his people, the double crown uniting Upper and Lower Egypt, and numerous other sacred objects charged with divine power. The most important coronation ritual was the union with the royal Ka, the royal life force that had existed since the beginning of kingship and passed from one pharaoh to the next. This divine essence existed independently of any individual ruler, representing the perfect, eternal office of kingship rather than the mortal person who temporarily embodied it. Through ritual union with this royal Ka, the new pharaoh transcended his individual limitations and became one with all previous and future kings. As living Horus and son of Ra, the pharaoh's primary cosmic responsibility was the maintenance of Ma'at, truth, justice, and cosmic order. Without the pharaoh's daily rituals and proper governance, the Egyptians believed that the delicate balance between order and chaos would collapse. The sun might fail to rise, the Nile might not flood, and creation itself might revert to primordial chaos. This cosmic responsibility was enacted through temple rituals performed either by the pharaoh himself or by priests acting as his representatives. In these daily ceremonies, the pharaoh would present offerings to the gods, care for their sacred images, and reaffirm the covenant between divine and human realms. These were not mere devotional acts, but crucial cosmic maintenance, without which the world could not continue to function properly. Outside the temple, the pharaoh maintained Ma'at through just governance, military defense against Egypt's enemies, and construction of monuments that anchored divine power in the physical landscape. Building temples, commissioning statues of gods, and erecting obelisks were not merely expressions of royal ego, but sacred duties that channeled divine energy into the human realm, ensuring prosperity and order throughout the land. As both god and human, the pharaoh walked a difficult line. Though divine in essence, he remained subject to human limitations. Though theoretically perfect in his office, individual pharaohs could fail in their duties, make errors in judgment, or suffer defeat in battle. Egyptian theological texts rarely acknowledge this contradiction directly, preferring to maintain the fiction of the pharaoh's infallibility, even when reality suggested otherwise. When military defeats or natural disasters occurred, they were typically attributed not to the pharaoh's personal failings, but to the people's lack of proper devotion or the malevolent interference of foreign gods or demons. Even in periods of political fragmentation, when multiple claimants might simultaneously assert royal authority, each maintained the full theological apparatus of divine kingship, claiming unique connection to the gods regardless of political reality. The physical body of the pharaoh is the vessel of divine presence, required special care both in life and after death. Royal regimens of food, exercise, and ritual purification maintained the pharaoh's bodily purity, separating him from ordinary human functions and limitations. After death, elaborate mummification preserved the royal body, creating an eternal dwelling place for the royal Ka and Ba. Royal tombs, from the earliest dynastic burials to the massive pyramids of the Old Kingdom and the hidden sepulchres of the Valley of the Kings, reflected the unique status of the pharaoh in Egyptian theology. These were not merely grand graves, but resurrection machines, designed to transform the deceased king into an eternal divine being who would join the cosmic gods while maintaining beneficial influence over Egypt. One of the most intriguing aspects of Egyptian royal mythology was the Eswaidat festival, or Jubilee celebration, typically held after the pharaoh had ruled for 30 years and at regular intervals thereafter. During this elaborate ceremony, the aging pharaoh would perform a ritual run around a designated course, demonstrating his continued physical vigor and receiving renewed divine energy. Some scholars interpret the Esesed festival as a ritualized version of an archaic practice in which kings who had grown too old or weak were actually killed and replaced. By the historical period, this had transformed into a symbolic rejuvenation, allowing the pharaoh to be ritually reborn without the traumatic disruption of actual regicide. The Sed festival highlights the tension between the eternal, perfect office of kingship and the mortal, aging individual who temporarily embodied it. Despite their divine status, pharaohs were not worshipped in the same manner as cosmic gods like Amun, Osiris, or Isis. Rather than having dedicated temples for their worship as gods, pharaohs established houses of millions of years, institutions that combined elements of mortuary temples, cult centers for the royal Ka, and places where the living king could perform rituals for his deified predecessors, particularly his immediate ancestor. After death, the pharaoh's divine cult was generally limited to his mortuary temple and often faded within a few generations, except for exceptional rulers who achieved more lasting veneration. This practice reflected the Egyptian understanding that while the office of kingship was eternally divine, individual kings were temporary embodiments who would ultimately merge with Osiris and the cosmic gods, rather than maintaining distinct divine identities indefinitely. The most remarkable exception to this pattern was Amenhotep III of the 18th dynasty, who began his own divine cult during his lifetime, establishing himself as a god to be worshipped alongside the traditional deities. His son, Amenhotep IV, later Akhenaten, took this innovation to its logical extreme, eventually suppressing the traditional gods in favor of the Aten, the visible sun disk, with the royal family as its sole intermediaries. This Amarna revolution, named after Akhenaten's new capital city, represents the most radical reinterpretation of royal divinity in ancient Egypt. By positioning himself and his wife Nefertiti as the only beings who could understand and communicate with the Aten, Akhenaten eliminated the traditional priestly hierarchy and concentrated all divine authority in royal hands. This theological experiment collapsed after his death, with later pharaohs returning to traditional concepts of royal divinity within the established pantheon. The Egyptian concept of divine kingship influenced many other ancient civilizations. The Kushite kings, who ruled as Egypt's 25th dynasty, adopted its theological trappings before bringing them back to their homeland in modern Sudan. The concept of god kings spread to ancient Nubia, where rulers at Napata and Meroe maintained Egyptian style divine kingship for centuries after Egypt itself had fallen under foreign rule. Even Alexander the Great, when he conquered Egypt in 332 BCE, embraced aspects of pharaonic theology, visiting the oracle of Amun at Sewa Oasis, where he was allegedly declared the son of Amun. The subsequent Ptolemaic dynasty maintained the formal structures of pharaonic divinity while blending them with Greek concepts of ruler cult, creating a hybrid theology that preserved Egyptian traditions while adapting them to a new political reality. As you drift deeper into the peaceful realm between wakefulness and dreams, imagine the pharaoh in all his divine glory, the double crown upon his head, the crook and flail crossed upon his chest, the uraeus serpent at his brow, ready to strike any who would threaten cosmic order. See him standing between heaven and earth, his feet firmly planted in the black land of Egypt, while his crown touches the divine realm above. This image of the divine king, mediator between gods and humans, maintainer of Ma'at and vessel of Horus, endured for over 3,000 years, the longest continuous political theology in human history. Through conquest and liberation, prosperity and famine, political unity and fragmentation, the core concept remained. In the sacred person of the pharaoh, heaven and earth met, ensuring that the life-giving patterns of the cosmos would continue without interruption, that the sun would rise each morning, that the Nile would flood each year, that Egypt would endure eternally. In our next chapter, we will explore how Egyptian myths and religious concepts continued to influence world culture long after the last hieroglyphs were carved, the last temples fell silent, and the last pharaoh ruled, examining the remarkable afterlife of Egyptian mythology in later religions, literature, art, and even modern popular culture. As we reach the final chapter of our journey through Egyptian mythology, let us explore how these ancient stories and concepts have continued to resonate through time, influencing religions, literature, art, and popular culture long after the last temples fell silent and the final hieroglyphs were carved. The myths of Egypt did not die with the civilization that created them. Instead, they underwent a remarkable transformation, continuing to live and evolve in the human imagination across millennia. When the last native Egyptian pharaoh fell to Persian conquest in 343 BCE, Egyptian religion had already endured for over 3,000 years. Even under subsequent Greek and Roman rule, the ancient temples continued to function. Priests maintained traditional rituals, and the old gods received their offerings. Though foreign rulers brought new influences, they largely respected and even adopted Egyptian traditions rather than suppressing them. The first significant challenge to traditional Egyptian religion came with the spread of Christianity in the early centuries CE. By the late 4th century, when Roman Emperor Theodosius I banned pagan practices throughout the empire, the ancient temples began to close, their priests dispersed, and the knowledge of hieroglyphic writing gradually disappeared. The final blow came with the Arab conquest of Egypt in the 7th century, after which Islam became the dominant religion. Yet even as the formal worship of Egyptian deities faded, elements of the old beliefs persisted in transformed ways. Early Egyptian Christianity particularly Coptic traditions, absorbed numerous aspects of ancient practices. The ancient Egyptian Ankh, symbol of life, evolved into the Coptic cross. Images of Isis nursing the infant Horus influenced representations of the Madonna and Child. Egyptian concepts of divine kingship and the afterlife found echoes in Christian theology. During Europe's medieval period, direct knowledge of ancient Egyptian beliefs was largely lost, replaced by fantastical interpretations based on classical Greek and Roman writings. Egypt became a land of mystery and magic in the European imagination, a reputation enhanced by misunderstandings of hieroglyphic writing, which many believed contained secret, esoteric knowledge. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in Egypt, though still filtered through classical perspectives. Scholars began studying Egypt's monuments with fresh eyes, though they lacked the key to reading hieroglyphs. Egyptian symbolism, particularly obelisks and pyramids, became fashionable elements in Renaissance art and architecture, though their meanings were often misinterpreted according to contemporary beliefs. A profound shift came in 1798 with Napoleon's expedition to Egypt, which included not only military personnel but also scholars and scientists tasked with documenting the ancient civilization. Their work, published as the monumental Description de l'Egypte, introduced accurate images of Egyptian monuments and artifacts to European audiences for the first time. Most significantly, the expedition discovered the Rosetta Stone, which eventually enabled Jean-François Champollion to decipher hieroglyphs in 1822, reopening access to authentic Egyptian texts after a gap of nearly 1,500 years. The 19th century witnessed an explosion of popular fascination with ancient Egypt, often referred to as Egyptomania. Egyptian motifs appeared in furniture, jewelry, architecture, and fashion. Mummies became objects of both scientific study and public entertainment, sometimes unwrapped before audiences and mummy unrolling parties. Collectors eagerly acquired Egyptian artifacts, feeding a thriving market for both authentic antiquities and clever forgeries. Literature of the period reflected this obsession. Edgar Allan Poe's Some Words with a Mummy satirized contemporary Egyptomania, while Théophile Gautier's The Romance of a Mummy reimagined life in ancient Thebes. Percy Bysshe Shelley's poem Ozymandias used the fallen statue of Ramesses II as a meditation on the inevitable decline of even the mightiest empires, capturing the romantic fascination with Egypt's ruins as symbols of transience and eternity. By the early 20th century, Egyptian themes had entered the realm of popular entertainment. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb by Howard Carter in 1922 triggered a worldwide sensation that influenced everything from Hollywood films to home decor. The alleged curse of the pharaohs that supposedly claimed the lives of those involved in opening the tomb captured the public imagination, spawning countless stories and reinforcing Egypt's association with supernatural powers. Universal Studios' 1932 film, The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff, established the mummy as a standard figure in horror cinema, though its portrayal had little connection to actual Egyptian beliefs about the dead. Instead, it tapped into Western fears about the exotic and mystical East, combined with anxieties about death and the unknown. Subsequent mummy films have continued this tradition of using Egyptian elements as atmospheric window dressing rather than engaging with authentic mythology. Beyond entertainment, Egyptian concepts have influenced numerous esoteric and spiritual movements in the modern era. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in the late 19th century, incorporated Egyptian deities and symbols into its magical system. Aleister Crowley's Thelemic religion drew heavily on Egyptian imagery, particularly the worship of Horus. Various New Age movements have adopted and adapted Egyptian concepts, often claiming them as sources of ancient wisdom or lost knowledge. In contemporary literature, Egyptian mythology continues to inspire authors across genres. Elizabeth Peters's Amelia Peabody mystery series follows a family of early 20th century Egyptologists amid archaeological discoveries and occasional supernatural elements. Rick Riordan's Kane Chronicles introduces young readers to Egyptian gods in a modern setting, while N.K. Jemison's Dreamblood duology creates a fantasy world with a complex magic system inspired by Egyptian concepts of the soul and afterlife. Egyptian imagery pervades modern popular culture, appearing in everything from video games like Assassin's Creed Origins to the music videos of Katy Perry. The distinctive visual nature of Egyptian art, the profile faces with forward-facing eyes, the hieroglyphic writing, the monumental architecture, makes it instantly recognizable even to those with little knowledge of the actual civilization or its beliefs. Yet this widespread recognition often comes with profound misunderstandings. Movies and television shows frequently depict ancient Egyptian religion as death-obsessed, focusing on mummies, curses, and elaborate burial practices, while ignoring the life-affirming aspects of Egyptian spirituality. Pyramid schemes of supernatural power, mistranslated spells, and dramatic mischaracterizations of deities abound in popular media. Perhaps the most persistent misconception involves the pyramids themselves. Despite overwhelming archaeological evidence that these structures were royal tombs built by skilled Egyptian workers, alternative theories proliferate, claiming they were built by aliens, advanced lost civilizations, or supernatural means. These theories, while entertaining, often disrespect the actual achievements of ancient Egyptian engineers and architects. Beyond specific distortions, the broader legacy of Egyptian mythology raises important questions about cultural appropriation versus appreciation. When modern spiritual movements adopt Egyptian deities without understanding their original context, when fashion designers use sacred symbols as decorative elements, or when films reduce complex religious concepts to scary special effects, something essential is lost in translation. Yet there is also value in the continued life of these ancient myths in modern consciousness. The gods of Egypt may no longer receive formal worship, but they live on in our stories, our art, our imaginations. Their symbols continue to evoke powerful responses. Their narratives of death and rebirth, order versus chaos, and the search for immortality still resonate with fundamental human concerns. Unlike some ancient civilizations that exist primarily in scholarly texts, Egypt maintains a vivid presence in popular awareness. The visual splendor of its art, the monumental scale of its architecture, and the inherent drama of its myths ensure that even as details are forgotten or misunderstood, the essence of Egyptian cultural achievement remains compelling. In museums around the world, visitors still stand in awe before sarcophagi and canopic jars, golden masks, and painted papyri. Children still learn about hieroglyphs in school, drawing cartouches of their names and marveling at a writing system that combines pictures and symbols. Tourists still flock to the pyramids and temples, trying to imagine the civilization that created such enduring monuments. This persistent fascination suggests that Egyptian mythology speaks to something fundamental in human experience. The Egyptian preoccupation with life after death reflects our universal confrontation with mortality. Their concepts of Ma'at embody our ongoing search for justice and cosmic order. Their gods, with both animal and human aspects, remind us of our connection to the natural world and the complexity of consciousness itself. Perhaps most significantly, Egyptian mythology offers a vision of time that contrasts sharply with our modern linear perspective. For the ancient Egyptians, time was both linear and cyclical. Events progressed, but within recurring patterns like the daily solar journey and the annual Nile flood. This cyclical understanding offered reassurance that chaos would always give way to order, that death would always lead to rebirth, that what seems like an ending might actually be a transformation. In our rapidly changing world, this ancient wisdom offers a measure of comfort. Like Ra descending into the underworld each night, only to emerge renewed at dawn, like Osiris transformed from murdered king to lord of eternity, like the phoenix-like Bennu bird regenerating from its own ashes. We too may find renewal after apparent endings. As you drift now toward sleep, the daily small death from which we are all reborn, imagine the ancient Egyptian night sky stretching above you, the same stars that ancient eyes once watched. Picture the sacred bark of Ra making its nighttime journey through the underworld, battling and overcoming the forces of chaos so that the sun might rise again in the morning. Feel yourself wrapped in the protective wings of Isis, hearing the soothing rattles of Hathor's sistrum, guarded by the watchful gaze of Anubis. The gods of Egypt, though no longer worshipped in temples of stone, continue their eternal existence in the temple of human memory and imagination. Their myths remind us that beauty endures, that order returns after chaos, that wisdom accumulates across generations, and that in both life and stories, endings give birth to new beginnings. May your dreams be peaceful, guided by ibis-headed Thoth through realms of wisdom and wonder. May your awakening tomorrow mirror Ra's triumphant emergence from the eastern horizon, renewed and ready to experience the world afresh. And may the ancient myths of Egypt continue to inspire and comfort you, connecting you to a tradition of human meaning making that stretches back to the very dawn of civilization. Good night, dear listener, as you join the eternal cycle of sleep and awakening that the Egyptians recognized as one of the fundamental rhythms of existence. In the gentle darkness behind your eyelids, may you find the same creative potential that the ancient Egyptians saw in the waters of Nun, the possibility of renewal and transformation and rebirth that makes each day an opportunity for wonder.